It's finally here! Just when you thought it was safe to dip your toe back into the discourse, out comes the beta of the bracket system for Commander. We've got 5 different tiers that range from Exhibition right up to CEDH, and an entire list of game changers, cards that are basically the things to watch out for. Gavin Verhey said himself that this is the closest we'll ever get to a watch list for banned cards in Commander. But is this good? Is it useful? What do I think of it because I'm a talking man on the internet? All that and more in today's video, but first a message from today's sponsor, which is me, PleasantKenobi. You may have heard me talk about Patreon on the channel before, and a lot of people don't want to sign up to a new service to help support their favorite content creator, to pay for hardware and editors, for example. At the moment, I'm not paying for editors because I lost 2 large sponsors over the Christmas period. I actually learned about them over the Christmas period, which kind of sucked. But I would love to have more income coming in so I can pay editors, so I can focus more on research and writing, more so than getting the edits done in some sort of reasonable fashion. So if you don't want to sign up for Patreon, but you would like to support the channel, there's going to be a link down below. If you click the join button, you can join my membership program on YouTube itself, and then you don't have to go through a third party, and you can help support the channel. There will be 3 tiers, but as of this video coming out, I may only show 1, but there will be 3 in about 24 hours. The first one is simply ad blocker absolution. All tiers, including the lowest, will get prioritized comment replies from me on my videos. You get a membership badge that levels up over time, a little milk carton, and you get access to unique channel emotes. It supports the channel more than any monetized ad-supported views ever would. The middle tier is a membership that allows you access to my Discord server where I hang out regularly and give abuse to the people on there. We also have semi-regular events kicking off. We're about to start Pauper EDH or Peasant EDH. The Commander's uncommon and the rest is common. And we should have a TTS League for Warhammer 40k kicking off again as the Imperial Guard and Eldar Codex are out now. And the top tier allows you to join the Splicer Call, which is like the exclusive club chat room that I have once a week with people for a voice call where we talk all things nerdy, hobby, and gaming. Patreon still exists and it's a bit cheaper to sign up to because they take less of a cut than YouTube does, but in essence this is a way for you to directly support me without buying external products or engaging with a sponsor or similar to allow me to pay for editors to help grow the channel. I am a one-man band. I do pretty well at making stuff on this channel in spite of that. The views I get for being a one-person show is pretty damn good. But I'd like to get more freelance help with that to help grow and get bigger. I've mentioned this in the past before, and I've kind of rested on my laurels since having a baby and basically becoming a father. But I want to step it up. And if you want to help me go with that and help me on that journey, then you can support me through the membership program down below. It's like a Twitch sub, but you don't have to go anywhere near Twitch. And with that out of the way, let's talk brackets. It comes in 5 categories, and these are designed to give us the tools to get games in a matchmake in situations where you don't have a common play group. And that's really important. It was mentioned on the stream live, it's in Gavin Verhey's video that he released yesterday as well, and it's on the main article that these are not meant to enforce some sort of new ban list or system on you. If you get regular games in with other players, it's absolutely fine for you not to utilize these. So let's start with a holistic viewpoint from me, then I'm going to unpack exactly what they are, then I'm going to go on to the game changes and talk about what this means for the future. Firstly, it's really important to understand that these are in beta. They were originally planned to be available for MagicCon Las Vegas last year in October that I was at, and they didn't show up. I was quite excited to see what they did with them. In many ways, that's good that they've taken some time to build upon these and not rush to put something out, to give it some thought. That said, the original idea of them was going to be that cards were pointed, and that I didn't agree with the idea that your deck is automatically in like category 4, the highest powered decks, because you're playing one category 4 card. But what I liked about the pointing or the bracketing of cards individually, it meant that perhaps, just maybe, we can come up with a number system. What I expected to see was that we'd be able to add up the numbers from your deck. So if you had 10 category 4 cards and 5 category 3 cards, that's 40 plus 15, you get to 55 points. And eventually when you add them all up across categories 1 through 4, of course, most cards in the game not being in a category, this would be like, just the top saltiest, the top most played cards in the format, well, you didn't get a number, and you can compare numbers. If I had a 700 and you had a 400, there might be a big disparaging gap between how much, either in quantity or power level, we are playing with. And I was quite excited for that. That was where I thought this was going, and I was quite looking forward to toying with that. They never talked about doing the adding up of numbers, but that was the way I thought I would come out using the bracket system. Instead, we've got a Rule 0 or Session 0, for those of you that play Dungeons & Dragons, supporting framework. The bracket system is basically a language, a tool, or a method to have that conversation ahead of a game of Commander. And it's a little bit soft and a little bit muddy. Like, ultimately, I don't know how useful this is to me. I just hope it's useful to new players and people attending conventions that aren't like me. There is just not a whole lot here, and maybe that's for the better. Maybe we need a less restrictive system. It's all about language, like I said. It's all about giving us a framework to have these conversations. I'm just not even sure how helpful this is. And that's what I want out of this. If you're having a conversation around brackets and game changers or pointed cards, which is not a thing anymore, or not a thing that's going to happen, I want the conversation to be helpful. Like, I want us to come out of it thinking that we've got a better game out of it, instead of an arbitrary thing or a thing we just don't even pay attention to. This is an awful lot of information to go into if you're just going to fucking ignore it. So let's talk about the bracket system overall. The one caveat to this system is that you've got to remember it will not fix bad actors. So if someone wants to downplay what their deck is to pub stomp people, that's the thing you're always going to get. In category 1, you have the exhibition, your ultra casual commander decks. No mass land denial, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, few tutors. At 2, you have the core, the average current pre-constructed deck. No mass land destruction, no chaining extra turns. Importantly, not chaining. One extra turn spell is fine, but like duplicating that spell, copying it, or casting multiple in a row is what's considered bad here. No 2-card infinite combos. No game changers. Few tutors. Really, outside of the chaining, like no extra turn to chaining, they sound exactly the same. And also, one of the things Gavin talked about was that a huge swath of people want to play at a power level lower than a precon. And is that true? Is that a thing out there? Like, precon power levels across the board have increased. There are outliers, you know, certain Doctor Who decks, Warhammer decks, and Valgavoth, for example, for the Dustmourn cycle. But ultimately, I think most people, even slamming together just a few staples on top of like a pile of cards they want to play, are going to have a deck that's more powerful than the average precon. Or at least, that was my preconceived notion. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Let me know in the comment section below. How often do you play at a power level that's lower than precon, even when you're playing theme decks? Number 3 is upgraded. Beyond the strength of an average precon deck, no mass land denial, no chain of extra turns. Late game 2-card infinite combos are okay here, and yet 3 game changers. Maximum of 3 to be in bracket 3. Bracket 4 is high-powered commander. It's time to go wild. That's no restrictions other than the banned list. And 5 is the exact same thing, but with a mentality and attitude towards competitive play, or a tournament structure, or a metagame. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. And bearing in mind this is a framework, and I think it's an admirable pursuit to give us a framework to have a conversation with people. Because there is an issue around Commander. The previous framework, if you will, was this 1 to 10 system that didn't fucking work. Thus the perpetual, ongoing, never-ending joke, my deck is a 7. Now, the thing is, looking at this at first glance, it's just the same thing again for the most part, except my deck is always a 3. Or maybe a 4. I also thought that perhaps I was built into a 4. But when I checked Moxfield, which, by the way, Moxfield, Skyfall, EDH Rec were all in on the information, thus they had it all ready to go upon announcement. Moxfield says that every deck I've built that I've bothered to put into Moxfield, a lot of my decks I just don't bother to write up, which is a bad thing to do as a content creator. Sorry, I should put more decks on Moxfield. Follow me on Moxfield and comment on my decks, and I'll start to put more of them on there. I'm not going to do it if no fucker's looking at them. What's the point? Everything I do is for engagement. Everything I do is for all of my decks are 3s. Now, that's an interesting one, right? I'm not saying this from an ego perspective, because I don't like to pretend I'm the big bad or anything like that. But I do think that when I play with the majority of my friends, other content creators, and viewers, and randoms that don't even know who I am at events and things, people do tend to perceive me as one of the larger threats at the table, both from a knowing what I'm doing perspective, because I guess I just played a lot of fucking Magic at this point, I'm an old man, but also that my decks tend to be quite powerful. Like, even when I'm not optimizing towards the competitive edge, I'm often playing a couple of game changers, you guys, Cradles and New Ancient Tombs, but I'm also doing things that will kill the table. See the deck that I played in EDH and Chill on the weekend, where I played, not Anim Pakal, Arbaz Mir, and just machine gun down the table quicker than I thought I was going to do. I think that deck is super powerful, but it feels more than a slightly upgraded precon by quite a margin. So basically, the scale here, and this point here, between 3 right up to the edges of 5, that's where I play. But like, that doesn't sound anything like the 2 categories they're describing. I guess, on reflection, I don't optimize every deck. I've talked on this channel before about not optimizing every deck, because I don't find that very fun. Min-maxing completely is not where I find the enjoyment in card games. I actually like playing suboptimal cards and solving the problem that is the game state through those suboptimal cards. That's very fun for me. And then beyond that, there is this conversation around, like, does that mean that everything in category 4 can be CDH if you go to a tournament and play Cutthroat with take backsies? And that's just not true, right? Even the most powerful, powered up, optimized decks, like when I used to play Tachiova, Mox Diamonds, Mana Crypts, Gaia's Cradles and all that jazz, Tachiova was quite far removed from what a CDH deck would be. I played a CDH pod once and won, and it upset them, because they also perceived this and they knew this. The deck shouldn't win those pods. I'm playing far too little interaction, for example. Already had an argument on my Discord about this morning, where someone was saying that basically even Ladies Looking Left is a CDH deck if you rock up to a CDH tournament with it, which of course is not true. If you're playing the elf cards I own as a 14-year-old child, you're not playing in Modern. You're playing a deck that is Modern legal, but it's so far removed from what Modern is as a format, it's not valuable or useful to describe it as such. One succinct talking point on Reddit that I saw, that I had a similar vibe for but didn't come up with this verbiage, so I'm just going to say that I got it from Reddit, was that someone said that if you have to ask what a CDH deck is, what a 5 is in this category, then your deck is a 4. It's not a 5 if you have to ask. But realistically, is any of that useful? Having 2 categories here that a new player comes in and looks at, like, you had a franchise player look, who is looking at this and finding it useful? Like, I just straight up assumed I was in the 4 category because I'm a, you know, an entrenched player who likes to play loads of shit like, you know, mass land destruction and stuff like that. And that's the only thing that gets me into a 4. I've got a deck where every card begins with the letter A. That will be an EDH and Chill episode that will come out this weekend, maybe early next week on Modo. And my deck is apparently a optimized 4 simply because I'm playing the card Armageddon. That doesn't make any sense to me. I guess I'm just an upgraded precon player. That's what I've always been. That's what I always will be. I don't know. Like, at first glance, I thought this might be useful, but when I started to apply it to my own decks, I started to realize that actually this isn't that useful. Telling people that my decks are upgraded precons will make those people upset with me, because they quite clearly aren't upgraded precons. Abdul Adrian is nowhere near being this optimized 4, the one I play on the Shut Up and Play, but it's absolutely not an upgraded precon. It is a deck that can do some truly nonsensical bollocks if you know what you're doing and you play to the table. So I guess what I'm saying is, there's not that much room for nuance here, is there? Like, the gaps between 1 and 2 on this list is tiny. The space between 3 up to the beginning of 5 is absolutely huge. Some might say it's 6 degrees of huge. At which point, why haven't we got a 1 to 10 scale again? I'm starting to think that actually categorizing decks in Commander is bordering on pointless and almost impossible. I'll talk more on that towards the end of the video. And we should talk about game changers too. These are cards that are described as, well, game changers, cards that change the dynamic of a game, often in a way that is frustrating for your opponent. And I do quite like this terminology. Every card here fits and makes sense, barring one. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But all of these cards, from your Drannith Magistrates to your Bolus's Citadel to your Ancient Tomb and your Jessica's Will. Okay, Ancient Tomb is one of the other ones I'm a little bit sus on. But all of these cards accelerate you massively ahead or transform the game to be around them. And I think it's important that we have a category for these cards. I think an exhaustive list is impossible. I think 40 cards is a reasonable inroad. Like, for example, here we don't even have Armageddon, because Armageddon itself is covered by the no mass land destruction sort of like caveat, right? It's like a hard and fast codified like piece of etiquette now, because it's on the fucking bracket system. That's not something we've ever had before. It's been discouraged with like, but never banned, right? But that said, a couple of things about the game. This is nitpicking here. I think this is only useful because, okay, let me explain. Force of Will does not deserve to be on the same list as any of the other cards on this list, even Fierce Guardianship. Fierce Guardianship does say non-creature, so it's called a downside. It's not the best counterspell in Commander, though it's close. But it basically requires you to have your commander in play, which is something that you're always trying to do. Meanwhile, Force of Will costs 5 mana to hardcast it. It costs you a life. You have to exile a card, not discard, but exile a card from your hand. So you 2-for-1 yourself to either stop your opponent winning or win yourself. Fierce Guardianship is 1 protection spell for free that supports your combo or stops your opponent's combo. Force of Will is 2 extra cards to make your 2-card combo now a 4-card combo, or its card disadvantage against one person's winning at a table of 4. Card disadvantage in Commander, when we're talking from an efficiency or like powerful or broken perspective, is exaggerated 4-fold, or say 3-fold. Because normally in a 1v1, if I go 2 cards down to stop your 1, I'm 1 card down. If I go 2 cards down to stop your 1, but players C and D have also got their 1, you are hugely behind. The 2-for-1 of Force of Will is bad. In Legacy, there's this old joke that Force of Will is a bad card, but a necessity. The reason I don't like it being on here is that Force of Will isn't truly a game changer. The game does not necessarily revolve around it, no more than a Spell Pierce or a Mana Drain. Hell, Mana Drain allows you to untap and cast an Ugin or an Ulamog sometimes, making it far more of a game changer than Force of Will. My problem with including it on this list is that I think the average crap deck, the average slightly upgraded precon, which is apparently the character that I'm playing, sporting a Force of Will is actually just a reasonable thing for it to do. It's a reasonable bit of interaction in a format like full of multiple other players drawing lots of cards. Putting it in the game changer list here further cements its boogeyman status, and Force of Will does not deserve to be on the same list as fucking Drannith Magistrate or Smothering Tithe or Gaia's Cradle. That's just nonsense. The other one is Ancient Tomb, because I'm a big fan of telling people to proxy this into their decks and play it, because it allows much more expensive commanders to be viable, but at a true downside of damage every time. But I do understand that fast mana compounds, and Ancient Tomb is fast mana, and thus, when we're allowing Sol Ring to be like, you know, the standard bearer of the format and not one to be included on this list, then all the other fast mana gets the raw end of the stick. Remember, Tomb is a land drop, not even a multiple artifacts you can play on a turn or triggering your Metalcrafts and such. Sol Rings and Crypts are so much more powerful than Tombs in Commander. But that's just some... Ancient Tomb is nitpicky. Force of Will is my dislike of turning it into this boogeyman hyper-competitive staple, when in reality it's just a very reasonable card that if it was cheap, Blue would play more of. Ultimately, I like the idea of having some language you can use to discuss stuff. But ultimately, this is so muddy when you get to between the 3 and the 5 that I'm not sure if it is all that useful in its current state. I can't imagine having a conversation with someone at my game store, one of the younger, newer, fresher-faced players who do try and play, you know, Kirik, CDH and shit like that, and having a conversation around 3, 4s and 5s and having it come out any more clear or useful than what it did previously. I think the number of game changes you're playing is a much easier way to define anything than 2 categories that are the same, but one is about mentality, which some pub stompy, hyper aggro players will go towards. And I don't mean as a criticism, by the way. You'll get people who don't play CDH events, but play CDH decks, and then people who think they're in the high power 4 category, and they're going to butt heads, as in like, this player thinks this player's on the same level, and they're just not. I had a recent situation where a friend of mine invited me down to Southampton to play at a store that I just opened up. And we went down and played some Commander. And one of the players that we ended up putting in a pod of, just 3 of us, myself, my friend, and this other player, they told us that their decks ranged from 7s to 9s, which already was a red flag for me. We started playing, I was like looping 1 rings and shit, and the opponent was playing a slightly modified Tyranids deck. Now, in that circumstance, looking at this bracket system, they could have told me it was an upgraded precon, but I still feel like they would have told me it was a 4. There's some weird ego elements to that. There's just, you know, playing outside your comfort zones. There's not really understanding what a 4 is here. Yeah. Ultimately, I think the system is too muddy to be useful to a new or inexperienced player. I think number of game changes is much better, and I kind of wish those game changes were in a bracket 5, and they had less severe stuff. Force of Will in bracket 3, Brainstorm in 1 alongside Sol Ring. And then when we add up the number of those, we have a scale of sorts. A scale that allows for some nuance. I was thinking about how I wouldn't put Thassa's Oracle into this is a 5 category or a game changer, simply because there are situations where Thassa's Oracle isn't a game changer. Sometimes Thassa's Oracle is the best combo finisher in the history of Magic. By sometimes I mean the majority of the time. But sometimes you're playing Merfolk, or maybe you're playing Mono Blue Devotion. And if you get a win with Thassa's Oracle with Mono Blue Devotion, you're a king or a queen or a non-binary denomination of such, you're fucking bossing it. So, Thoracle ends up going down to being a 3 or a 4 in the categories that don't exist anymore that I was hoping. And thus, when you combine all of your deck and you add up all your 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s, you get like a number. That gives you some leeway where like Thoracle might not be categorized as a 5 all the time, but it gives us some sort of nuance where my deck comes up to 200 points and yours is 220, and that means we probably are close, right? I think it would have been a better comparison tool than this. And now I'm just getting into what I would have liked to have seen or I would have done. And of course that would have caused dialogue and discussion and anger and upset as people say certain cards are in the wrong categories, like I'm doing about Forcible and the Game Changers. But still, I think it would have been a more useful tool for having a conversation about the decks we're about. I, in its current state, don't see the brackets as being that. I don't find them that useful. It's a starting point, but then that's it. Fails to go any further than that. I came into this really wanting to like the brackets, and I don't hate them. I just don't see where anyone's going to use them beyond in the early lower tiers. Yeah, it's the same problem again, right? Everyone's deck's a 7, but in this case, it's a 3.5. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. I'll be back with more videos later in the week. If you enjoy what I do, check out the memberships down below. Helps support the channel, helps me to pay for an editor, helps me to pay for new tech and replacements and similar, and support me to do what I do, which is commentate on a card game. I'm a lucky man, I get it. I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.